Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
Karen, stocks may be quiet for now, but they enter this shortened holiday trading session at record highs. The S&P 500 closed above 5,500 for the first time yesterday. That's its 32nd record this year. And the NASDAQ 100 also set an all-time high with its first close above 20,000. Julian Emanuel, head of equity derivatives and quantitative strategy at Evercore ISI, thinks there are a lot of reasons behind the market rally.
So if inflation stays sticky for a number of more months, they'll be patient. If the economy starts to turn down, they will be less patient. Mistakes will not be made. Roll that all into the enthusiasm around AI and the potential for what we've seen as high multiple regimes can stay elevated. And you have a market that continues to rally.
Evercore ISI's Julian Emanuel speaking about the Fed there with Bloomberg's Tom Keene. He's got an end-of-the-year price target for the S&P 500 of 6,000. That's about 9% away from current levels.
Well, now let's turn to the presidential race, Nathan, and President Biden's efforts to ease mounting concerns about his candidacy. The president met with Democratic donors last night and chalked up his disastrous debate performance last week to his travel schedule. He'd been to Europe for D-Day and the G7 summit, then in Los Angeles for a fundraiser. White House spokeswoman Karine Jean-Pierre insists it was one bad night.
I would not see this as an episode. I would see this as what it was and what we believe it to be, which is it was a bad night. And he did, on top of that, he had a cold.
White House spokeswoman Karine Jean-Pierre says the president will turn the page from last week. He's meeting with the Democratic governors this evening, and he'll have his first post-debate interview with ABC News on Friday.
Well, despite those efforts, Karen, questions about President Biden's mental fitness aren't going away. The New York Times published a lengthy piece citing U.S. and foreign officials who say the president's lapses are becoming more frequent and worrisome. And at least one Democrat in Congress, Lloyd Doggett of Texas, is calling on Biden to step aside. Former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says the questions aren't going away.
I think it's a legitimate question to say, is this an episode or is this a condition?
The former Speaker Pelosi says it is a legitimate question to ask both President Biden and former President Trump. Congressman Jim Clyburn was asked whether he would support Vice President Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket.
I will support her if he were to step aside. But I want to support her going forward sometime in the future. I want this ticket to continue to be Biden-Harris.
Congressman Clyburn and former Speaker Pelosi both appeared on MSNBC, adding more fuel to Democrats' concerns. Former President Donald Trump's campaign raised $331 million in the latest quarter. That gives Trump more cash on hand than Biden for the first time.
Meanwhile, Nathan, Donald Trump's sentencing in his hush money case has been postponed until at least September 18th. Bloomberg's Amy Morris reports from Washington.
The judge has agreed to put off the sentencing while weighing the possible impact of a new Supreme Court ruling on presidential immunity. Trump had been scheduled to face sentencing July 11th on his multiple felony convictions of falsifying business records. He denies any wrongdoing. The delay sets the sentencing for September 18th at the earliest, well after the Republican National Convention. Trump's attorneys asked Judge Juan Merchan to set aside the guilty verdict. The judge said he would rule on September 6th, and the next date in the case is September 18th if, as the judge said, it's still necessary. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Amy, thank you. Turning to politics overseas, we're just one day away from the UK elections, and former Prime Minister Boris Johnson made a last-minute campaign push to rally Conservative voters.
There's only one thing to do. Vote Conservative on Thursday, my friends. And I know you will.
Boris Johnson won the previous election in 2019, but he is not standing as a candidate this year. He was ousted by his party following a series of scandals. Labour leader Keir Starmer is dismissing the Conservative strategy as desperate. The clear frontrunner in the polls is sticking to a familiar message of no complacency.
We go forward into the last yards, the last days. And you know what they say? The last yards are the hardest. It's really, really hard now. Nothing must be taken for granted. Every vote has to be earned. The polls don't predict the future.
Despite that caution from Keir Starmer, Bloomberg's composite poll of polls has Labour ahead of every other party by at least 20 points.
Well, turning back to the markets and the economy, Nathan, we get a slew of economic reports ahead of the July 4th holiday, and we get a preview with Bloomberg's Michael McKee.
Thursday's a national holiday, but the data still come out just a day early. It makes for a busy Wednesday for investors. Top of the list will be the ISM Services Index. How fast is the economy slowing, and what does it mean for prices and jobs? Speaking of jobs, initial jobless claims will get a lot of attention after ratcheting up the past 2 weeks. Is it the beginning of a trend or just a seasonal adjustment issue? Global Wall Street will also be watching the June ADP employment release, often derided, but still traded on as something of a portent, if not a prediction, for Friday's government payrolls report. Also on the list, the May trade balance, factory orders, and S&P Global Services and composite PMIs. Michael McKee, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Mike, thanks. In company news, Skydance Media has reached a preliminary deal to buy National Amusements. We get more from Bloomberg's Doug Krisner.
National Amusements is the controlling shareholder of Paramount Global, and we're told National is planning to refer this proposed deal to a Paramount Special Committee for review. Last month, a deal between Skydance and National Amusements seemed close, but talks broke down at the 11th hour. In the last week, the two re-engaged, with discussions picking up steam on Tuesday. New terms include a higher valuation for National Amusements. There's also stronger language indemnifying National against possible litigation resulting from the deal. National Amusements has 45 days to seek better offers. In New York, I'm Doug Krisner, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Doug, thank you. Paramount shares up more than 7% in early trading, and the rally in Tesla shares continue. They're up another 2.5% this morning after surging 5% yesterday. The carmaker reported deliveries for the second quarter that beat analyst estimates. Time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. For that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Hurricane Beryl is roaring across the Caribbean Sea as a powerful Category 4 storm on a path toward Jamaica and the Cayman Islands. At least 6 people have died after Beryl slammed islands in the southeast Caribbean. Beryl was losing some of its intensity, but was still forecast to be near major hurricane strength when it passes near or over Jamaica today with 145-mile-per-hour winds. This American tourist in Montego Bay heading back to New Orleans told ABC she was supposed to fly out Monday.
My flight was overbooked, so I had to scramble and find a flight today. So hopefully this one don't cancel on me and I get out of here in time.
National Hurricane Center Director Michael Brennan says Beryl is expected to bring life-threatening winds and storm surge to Jamaica.
We've seen the central pressure rise a little bit on the latest data from the Hurricane Hunter aircraft. We've seen the peak winds come down just a tad, but regardless of what happens to the peak winds, we're expecting a powerful hurricane to be moving west-northwestward across the Caribbean Sea.
National Hurricane Center Director Michael Brennan says people in flood-prone areas of Jamaica have been warned to seek safe shelter. Authorities say massive overcrowding, insufficient exits, and other factors contributed to a deadly stampede at a religious festival in northern India that killed now at least 121 people. The stampede happened on Tuesday afternoon in a village as large crowds rushed to exit a makeshift tent. It was not immediately clear what sparked the panic. The U.S. is alleging China is developing attack drones for Russia. European officials familiar with the matter say Chinese and Russian companies are developing an attack drone similar to an Iranian model deployed in Ukraine. An estimated 71 million Americans will travel for the 4th of July holiday. Airports will be especially busy. This man and his wife flew out of Los Angeles International.
We feel that we're also getting out before the actual date itself.
Airfares are up from last year. Meanwhile, an average price for a gallon of regular gas nationwide is $3.50, the lowest for this time of the year since 2021. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg, Karen.
All right, Michael Barr, thank you. It's time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update with John Stashower. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. A third straight Mets game that went extra innings. Sunday in New York, they lost when the Astros scored 5 runs in the 11th. Monday in D.C., the Mets won with a 6-run 10th. And last night, another big 10th inning.
Garcia lifts and delivers. Swung on, crushed, left field, deep, back towards the bullpen. Woods to the wall, gone! 2-run home run, Pete Alonso. 7-2 Mets in the 10th.
WCBS 5 in the 10th, 7-2 the final over the Nationals. Sean Manaea kept the Mets in it with 7 strong innings. He allowed only 1 earned run. Francisco Lindor hit a home run, and Brandon Nimmo had a pair of run-scoring hits in his return. Nimmo had missed Monday's game after he suffered a gash in his head when he fainted in his hotel room. As for the Yankees, they fell behind 5-0. A comeback fell short. They lost to Cincinnati at the stadium 5-4. Ellie De La Cruz with a triple and a 2-run homer for the Reds. Aaron Judge, another home run for the Yanks, his 32nd. If the season ended now, Judge would win the Major League Triple Crown. But when Baltimore won 2-0 in Seattle, the Orioles moved ahead of the Yanks back into first place. Red Sox won 8-3 in Miami. At Wimbledon, both the 6 seeds lost. That's Andrei Rublev on the men's side and Marketa Vondrousova, who last year won the tournament. Only the second time in Wimbledon history the defending women's champ has gone out in the opening round the following year. As for Novak Djokovic, he lost only 5 games. At one point, the Knicks were in hot pursuit of New York native Donovan Mitchell. He instead went from Utah to Cleveland, and Mitchell is staying with the Cavs. 3-year extension for $150 million. There was mystery over why Aaron Rodgers was a no-show at Jets minicamp last month. SNY reports the reason is that Rodgers was visiting Egypt and that he booked the trip before knowing when the Jets minicamp was taking place. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports, Karen and Nathan.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager. President Biden is making an all-out effort to reassure lawmakers, donors, and voters that his disastrous debate last week was a one-off, but questions about his age and mental fitness remain. Democratic Congressman Sept Moulton is among those confronting them.
Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. I think the debate was a disaster. And right now, a lot of people have concerns about President Biden's age and his ability to go toe-to-toe with Donald Trump. That's the reality that we face.
That was Democrat Sept Moulton on Bloomberg's Balance of Power, and he's not the only one confronting that reality. Joining us for more is Bloomberg's Kevin Whitelaw, who's covered Washington, D.C. for more than 2 decades. Kevin, good morning. After the debate, we heard the president say when you get knocked down, you get back up. But it feels at this point like he has a long way to get back up too, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, it's going to be a long, long road for him to try to sort of reshape the narrative. And it's obviously unclear whether he's going to be able to do so. That won't stop the White House from trying. The White House has called an all-staff meeting for today to try to rally the troops internally, as Bloomberg is reporting. And then he's set to do an interview with ABC News and George Stephanopoulos on Friday. That seems to be a pretty high-profile effort to create another moment where the president can maybe be seen engaging a little more substantively and lucidly than he was able to do during the debate. But obviously, each of these moments comes with a high risk, and it's still not clear that how many of these, whether you build up enough of those kind of moments, whether that's going to sort of undo the damage done in the debate.
What to make of this latest explanation, as the president put it to donors last night, that it was his travel schedule that had him falling asleep on the debate stage last week? I mean, he was at Camp David for nearly a week preparing for this after that long travel schedule.
Right, and he was in Europe for a few days. It wasn't a huge multi-stop tour. No, I think we've heard it's a cold. We've heard it's jet lag. I think that all of this is still essentially making the same point, which is the president is an older man, and obviously, I think the context here is that so is Donald Trump. Their age difference really isn't that different. I do think what may start to play down the line is obviously the way age is playing out sort of differently for each of them, and what that means maybe for the presidency. So I do think you are seeing an effort by some Democrats to try to see if they can point, sort of draw attention to some of what they saw as moments in the debate that showed maybe sort of how sort of Donald Trump's own issues with some of the answers and the ability to engage. But that still seems like a bit of a losing battle. Donald Trump supporters sort of know what they're getting with him, and I think you're seeing with Democrats still the slight unease about whether Biden is up to the task.
So in our last minute, Kevin, I mean, how crucial does that make this next few days of events that we're expecting from the president later on this week? He's meeting with governors this evening, and of course that sit-down interview with ABC News on Friday.
The thing I think that is a problem for the president now is he had this one really high-profile miss. So one or two successes can be seen as well. He's in and out. He's going to have to show, I think, over time that the debate was the outlier as opposed to an increasingly common event. So I think it's going to take him a long time and multiple events, multiple things in public. And this is a president whose advisors had really, been trying to shield him a little bit from these kinds of more unscripted moments for quite a while now.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Today, your morning brief on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed at 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, and Bloomberg 960 in San Francisco.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, SiriusXM, the iHeartRadio app, and on Bloomberg.com. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.